The day had finally arrived. The day humanity would meet an alien species for the very first time. Earth had been preparing for this moment for months. Governments, scientists, and military leaders had been working together, cautiously hopeful that the meeting would go smoothly. Tensions ran high, but so did the excitement. Humanity had long dreamed of meeting beings from other worlds, and now it was happening. In the heart of a bustling city, a massive, sleek spaceship touched down, its silvery surface reflecting the sunlight as it hovered above the ground. The alien vessel was unlike anything seen before, a mix of smooth curves and strange geometric patterns, its surface glowing softly as it settled into place. Crowds gathered around it, a mix of curiosity, awe, and wonder. News cameras zoomed in, broadcasting the historic event to every corner of the globe. The aliens, the Votari, had sent an emissary to Earth to introduce themselves. Their leader, a tall, slender alien named Commander Zarnak, stepped down from the ship first, flanked by a group of researchers and diplomats. But it was the youngest member of the delegation, Lyra, who caught the attention of the crowd. She was shorter than the others, with smooth green skin and large, curious eyes that reflected the vastness of the universe itself. Lyra had spent years studying human culture and was eager to meet them in person. Captain Nathan Drake, a seasoned astronaut, was among the first to greet the aliens. He had been chosen as the human representative for this important event, a symbol of humanity's unity and curiosity. As he approached the Votari delegation, his heart raced. He had spent his life studying space, and now, standing face to face with an alien species, he felt like a small child again, filled with wonder. "Greetings, Captain Drake," Commander Zarnak said in perfect English, his voice calm and measured. "It is an honor to meet you and the people of Earth. We come in peace." Drake smiled and shook the commander's hand, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. It wasn't every day that the fate of the planet was in his hands. "The pleasure is ours," Drake replied, his voice steady despite the nervous energy bubbling inside him. "Welcome to Earth." As the formal greetings continued, Lyra's eyes remained fixed on Drake. She was fascinated by the human, her mind racing with questions. She had read about humans, watched their broadcasts, and even studied their strange customs. But seeing one in person was an entirely different experience. After a few moments, Captain Drake noticed her staring at him with intense curiosity. He smiled at her, trying to break the ice. "You must be Lyra, right?" he asked, his voice warm. Lyra nodded eagerly. "Yes, I am," she replied, her voice smooth, but there was a hint of excitement in it. "I've studied so much about humans, but there's so much more I want to learn. I have many questions." Drake chuckled, sensing that Lyra's curiosity would be boundless. "Well, I'm happy to answer whatever I can," he said. "I don't understand one thing," Lyra said suddenly, her voice taking on a more serious tone. She stepped closer to him, her eyes locking with his. "When you said, 'You'll be inside me,' what do you mean by that?" Drake blinked, caught off guard. The phrase had been casually said in a conversation earlier, but now, hearing it come from Lyra, it sounded strange. He tried to process what she was asking, but his mind raced with confusion. Drake stammered, unsure how to answer. He looked around at the other diplomats, who were all watching with curious expressions. Was this some kind of cultural misunderstanding? He had no idea how to explain it, and Lyra was waiting for an answer, her large eyes fixed on him. Seeing his discomfort, a diplomat from Earth stepped forward, trying to smooth things over. "Captain Drake," she said in a quiet voice, "I think there has been some confusion. It's a human expression. It's not meant to be taken literally. It's just a way of saying, well, it's a way of offering help or support." Lyra looked confused. "Help? Support? But how can someone be inside you to help?" Her voice was filled with genuine confusion, not a hint of mockery or discomfort. She just didn't understand the concept. The group fell silent, unsure how to proceed. Captain Drake, trying to keep the situation light, cleared his throat. Well, you see, Lyra, it's more like saying we'll be there for each other. But, not physically inside each other. Just, metaphorically. Lyra nodded slowly, but her expression remained puzzled. She turned to Commander Zarnak and spoke to him in a language only the Votari could understand. The commander's eyes widened slightly, and he nodded, as though he had just realized the misunderstanding. You see, Commander Zarnak said to Lyra, switching back to English, humans use expressions that sometimes have different meanings. Their language is complex. This is one of those phrases. It's a way of offering comfort. Lyra still looked confused, but seemed to accept the explanation. Interesting, she murmured, her mind racing with the possibilities. Humans had such strange ways of communicating, but she was determined to learn. There was so much to understand. As the group continued their discussions, Lyra's questions grew deeper. She would learn more about humanity's peculiar ways, how they expressed love, compassion, and even confusion in ways she had never imagined. And as for Captain Drake, he couldn't help but smile at the innocent curiosity of the young alien. It was clear, the Votari were not so different after all. Their thirst for knowledge was just as strong as humanity's. The next day, Lyra found herself standing in front of the large building where the Earth diplomats and scientists had gathered. It was a simple structure, yet it seemed full of mystery to her. Inside, humans from all walks of life were busy working, studying, and preparing for the next phase of their interaction with the Votari. Lyra was still thinking about the strange phrase she had overheard from Captain Drake the day before. You'll be inside me. She couldn't get it out of her mind. It had been on her mind all night. She had read about human relationships and their ways of connecting, but nothing had prepared her for this strange phrase. She had heard similar phrases before, but they were always metaphors or cultural expressions. This one, however, seemed different. The words had sounded so casual, yet there had been a deep meaning behind them. Was it an Earth custom? A way to express trust or closeness? Lyra needed to understand. As she entered the building, she was greeted by several Earth scientists, including Captain Drake. He was already busy discussing data from the Votari ship with the others, but when he saw Lyra, he gave her a warm smile. "Good morning, Lyra," he said, his voice friendly. "How's everything going? Any more questions?" Lyra took a deep breath. "Yes, I have one more question. It's about what you said yesterday. The phrase, 'You'll be inside me.' What exactly does that mean? I don't understand it." Drake blinked, caught off guard once again. The phrase had seemed so casual when he said it, but now, hearing it come from Lyra, he realized how strange it might sound to an alien. He cleared his throat and turned to the others for support. The diplomats exchanged uncomfortable glances. It wasn't easy to explain human culture to an alien who had no context for such expressions. "Well," Drake began, trying to explain, It's not really about being physically inside someone. It's more of a metaphor, I guess. Humans often use language in creative ways to express emotions and ideas. The phrase was just a way to say, 'I'll be there for you,' or 'I'll support you when you need it.'" Lyra's large eyes blinked slowly, processing the information. "So it's not literal. You don't actually go inside someone." No, Drake replied quickly, his voice awkward. "It's just a saying, Lyra. You know, like how you might say, 'I'll have your back,' or 'I'll be there for you.' It doesn't mean anything physical." Lyra stared at him for a long moment, her mind racing. "But if you don't mean it physically, why use the word inside? That doesn't make sense to me. Why not say it another way?" The question hung in the air, and Drake suddenly found himself at a loss for words. He had always taken these expressions for granted, never truly thinking about how odd they might sound to someone from another world. After all, language was full of quirks, and this was just one of them. But to Lyra, who had no experience with such expressions, it was completely baffling. One of the scientists, Dr. Emily Lawson, stepped in, hoping to help clarify. It's like how humans sometimes say, "I'm in your heart," when they mean they care about someone. It's not literal either. It's just a way of expressing emotions that are difficult to put into words. We use metaphors because they can convey feelings more strongly than plain words alone. Lyra nodded slowly, her face a mixture of confusion and intrigue. "So you humans use inside to express emotions, but that seems so physical. Why not just use your minds to connect, like we do?" Drake chuckled nervously, realizing the vast differences between human and Votari culture. "Well, our physical senses are a big part of how we connect. We don't just rely on thoughts. We also connect through touch, through physical presence. That's how we show affection, I guess. It's not just mental, it's physical and emotional too." Lyra tilted her head, still processing the explanation. "But if you don't need to be inside someone to understand them, why does it matter so much?" The question was simple, yet it felt almost impossible to answer. For Lyra, whose species communicated and connected purely through thoughts and mental bonds, the idea of using physical touch or proximity to express affection was foreign. The Votari had no need for such gestures. They could communicate everything they felt through telepathy, their minds intertwined in a complex dance of emotion and thought. To Lyra, the way humans used their bodies seemed inefficient. Why bother with physical closeness when mental connection could achieve so much more? And yet, as she looked around at the humans in the room, she could see how important this connection was to them. They were always close to each other, exchanging glances and gestures that seemed to convey more than words could. As the conversation continued, Lyra's curiosity grew. She asked question after question, each one leading to another, each answer opening up more mysteries about human relationships. Despite her confusion, she felt an odd sense of admiration for the way humans formed bonds. They seemed to rely on something deeper, something beyond just logic and reason. The rest of the day passed in a blur as Lyra absorbed as much as she could. She spoke with Captain Drake several times, learning more about human culture, emotions, and the strange customs that made Earth so unique. But no matter how much she learned, one thing remained clear: humans and Votari were very different in how they connected with each other. Still, there was something fascinating about the way humans valued their physical and emotional connections, even if Lyra couldn't quite understand it. As the sun began to set, Lyra stood on the balcony of the building, staring out at the city below. She felt a strange sense of longing, a desire to understand, to connect with these humans in a way that went beyond words. But how could she ever fully grasp something so foreign to her? The days that followed were filled with more discussions and questions. Lyra had learned so much about the human way of life, but there was still so much she didn't understand. She spent time with Captain Drake and the Earth scientists, learning about human emotions, relationships, and culture. But no matter how much she learned, she always came back to one question. Why did humans rely so much on physical connections? Lyra's own species, the Votari, didn't need physical closeness to form bonds. They communicated telepathically, connecting their minds and sharing thoughts and emotions directly. It was a deep and personal connection, one that didn't require touch or proximity. For the Votari, their mental bond was enough to understand each other fully. But humans were different. They used their bodies in ways Lyra found puzzling. She had seen humans hold hands, hug, and kiss each other. They touched each other to express their feelings. It was something she didn't fully grasp. Why couldn't they just share their thoughts, like the Votari? Why did they need to use their bodies to show affection? One afternoon, as Lyra sat in a quiet room in the Human Research Center, she was once again deep in thought, trying to piece together what she had learned. She felt a soft tap on her shoulder and turned to find Captain Drake standing there, holding a small device in his hand. "Hey, Lyra," he said with a warm smile. "I was wondering if you'd like to try something. It might help you understand a bit more about human emotions." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "It's a human device," Drake explained. It can help you experience emotions the way humans do. It's called a haptic feedback suit. It's designed to simulate the sensations of touch and physical presence. It might not be the same as telepathy, but it could give you a new perspective on how humans experience emotions. Lyra hesitated. She wasn't sure if this was the right way to understand humans. After all, she had always believed that thoughts and feelings should be shared directly, without the need for physical sensation. But she was curious. The desire to understand the humans and their strange customs pushed her to try. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll give it a try." Drake smiled, clearly pleased. He helped her into the suit, which was lightweight but covered her body in soft sensors. Once it was on, he connected it to a small control panel. "The suit will simulate different emotions," he explained. "You won't just feel what's happening to you physically, but you'll also get a sense of the emotions behind those actions." Lyra nodded, intrigued but still unsure. She had read about human emotions, but experiencing them through this device was something completely different. Drake tapped a few buttons on the control panel, and suddenly, Lyra felt a wave of warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't a physical sensation, but something deeper, something that made her feel safe. She blinked, surprised by the feeling. It felt like when the Votari communicated with each other, sharing comfort and understanding. But there was something more to it. The warmth seemed to wrap around her, and she felt calm and peaceful. "That's a human hug," Drake said softly. "It's a simple gesture, but it's one of the ways we show care for each other. You can feel the comfort and trust in it." Lyra's eyes widened as the warmth faded, replaced by a slight tingle in her arms and legs. She had never felt anything like this before. It wasn't just a physical sensation. It was a feeling of connection, a bond that went beyond words. Drake continued to adjust the settings, and Lyra experienced more emotions. The flutter of excitement when someone receives a gift, the gentle comfort of holding someone's hand, and even the sharp pang of sadness when someone is lost. Each feeling was accompanied by a physical sensation that matched the emotion behind it. "This is incredible," Lyra said, her voice filled with wonder. "I can feel everything. The emotion, the connection. It's like I'm inside someone's mind, but with my whole body." Drake smiled, glad to see her starting to understand. "Exactly. Humans connect through both our minds and our bodies. We express our emotions not just with thoughts, but with physical presence. It's a way for us to share something deeply personal, something that words can't always express." Lyra was silent for a moment, processing the information. She had always believed that mental connection was the strongest form of communication. But now, she was beginning to understand that humans valued their physical connections just as much. The way they expressed emotions through touch and physical closeness was not a weakness. It was a strength. It allowed them to build bonds that went beyond just thoughts and words. As the simulation ended, Lyra removed the suit and looked at Captain Drake. "I never imagined that touch could carry so much meaning," she said thoughtfully. "It's not just about the physical sensation. It's about the emotions behind it, the trust, the comfort. It's deeper than I realized." Drake nodded. "Exactly. For humans, touch is a way to communicate something that can't always be said. It's a language of its own." Lyra looked out the window, her mind filled with new ideas. She had always thought of her telepathic connections with the Votari as the most meaningful form of communication. But now, she realized that humans had their own way of connecting, one that was just as powerful, just as important. It was a form of connection that used not only the mind but the body as well. And in that connection, there was something uniquely human. "I think I'm starting to understand," Lyra said quietly. "Your connections, they're not just about what's in your mind. They're about everything. Your heart, your body, your emotions. It's all part of what makes you human." Drake smiled, feeling a sense of pride. "Exactly, Lyra. And that's what makes humanity so unique." Lyra nodded, her thoughts swirling with new insights. She was beginning to see the world of humans in a new light. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't the same as the Votari way of connecting, but it was beautiful in its own right. And for the first time, she felt a deep respect for these strange, physical beings she had come to know. The next few days on Earth were full of discovery for Lyra. Every interaction, every conversation with the humans seemed to open up new layers of their complex culture. The more she learned, the more she felt a sense of admiration for the way humans lived, loved, and communicated. But even with all this new knowledge, there was still something about their relationships that confused her, something deeper she hadn't quite grasped yet. One evening, Lyra sat with Captain Drake in the research center's garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. It was a peaceful moment, the air cool and fresh, and the sounds of nature surrounding them. Lyra had been silent for a while, her eyes focused on the horizon. "Lyra," Drake said, breaking the silence, "you've been awfully quiet today. Something on your mind?" Lyra turned to him, her face thoughtful. "I've been thinking about something. About how humans experience pain." Drake blinked in surprise. "Pain? You mean physically or emotionally?" Lyra nodded. "Both, I think. You've shown me how humans connect through touch and emotions, but I'm still not sure how you deal with pain. The Votari, we don't really experience pain the way you do. If we feel discomfort, we can shut it out or numb it with our thoughts. But humans, when you experience pain, it seems to affect you deeply. It's not just something you can push away." Drake paused for a moment, his eyes on the fading light. He knew what Lyra meant. Pain was something humans had to endure, both physically and emotionally. It was part of their nature, part of the human experience. But explaining it to Lyra was not so simple. "Pain is a part of life for humans, Lyra," Drake said finally. "It's something we all go through, and it can be different for each person. Physical pain, like when you're hurt or injured, is just a signal from your body telling you something's wrong. But emotional pain, that's a little harder to explain." Lyra frowned, her eyes fixed on Drake's face. "Emotional pain? What is that? How can emotions hurt?" Drake turned to face her, sensing the confusion in her voice. "It's not always easy to understand. Emotional pain comes from things like loss, fear, and regret. It happens when you lose someone you love, or when something you care about is taken away. It's a feeling of emptiness, of heartache." Lyra's eyes softened. "That sounds difficult. I can't imagine feeling something like that. The Votari don't really have that kind of pain. If someone is lost, we just accept it and move on. But humans, you seem to carry your pain with you, sometimes for a long time." Drake nodded slowly. "It's true. For humans, pain is something that sticks with us, but it's also something we can learn from. It teaches us about ourselves and about life. And while it hurts, it also makes us appreciate the good things we have. Pain, in a way, helps us grow." Lyra was silent for a long time, her mind working to understand. She had learned so much already, but this was a new concept, a kind of emotional struggle that seemed to shape humanity in ways she hadn't expected. She had never thought that pain could have a purpose. For the Votari, emotions were meant to be controlled, not something to be endured or embraced. "How do you deal with it?" Lyra asked after a while. "How do you get through pain?" Drake looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "That's the thing about humans, Lyra. We don't always get through pain alone. We lean on each other. We share our feelings, our grief, and our fears. We connect with others who understand. And sometimes, just knowing that someone else feels the same way can help. It doesn't take the pain away, but it makes it easier to bear." Lyra's gaze softened, her eyes studying him. "So, you don't face pain by shutting it out, like the Votari. You face it by sharing it." "That's right," Drake said, his voice calm but filled with a quiet wisdom. "We face it by being with the people we care about, by sharing our struggles and offering support. It's not easy, and it doesn't always make the pain go away, but it helps us feel less alone. Lyra looked away, her thoughts racing. She had never thought of pain in this way. The Votari believed in avoiding suffering, in controlling emotions to maintain peace. They never allowed themselves to dwell on sadness or pain. But humans seemed to embrace their struggles, to face them head-on, and to rely on one another to get through it. There was a kind of strength in that, a strength Lyra hadn't fully understood until now. What if someone can't share their pain? She asked quietly. What if they're alone? Drake's eyes softened. Then, Lyra, that's when the world needs to step in. We help each other. It's not always easy, but no one should have to face pain alone. That's why humans value connection so much, because we know how important it is to share our burdens. Lyra felt a stirring in her chest, a strange warmth spreading through her. She had been learning so much about humans, about their strengths and their flaws. She had come to admire their resilience, their ability to keep going even when the world seemed heavy with pain. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't always fair, but it was a part of what made them human. As they sat together in the garden, watching the stars begin to twinkle in the sky above, Lyra felt a sense of peace she hadn't expected. For the first time since her arrival on Earth, she truly understood something about humanity, not just their language or their customs, but something deeper. She understood that even in their pain, humans had a strength that was worth admiring. And in that moment, she felt a small, but important, connection to these strange, beautiful beings. As the weeks passed, Drake found himself more captivated by the Votari's intellectual culture and technological advancements. Their ships were sleek and powerful, their cities were marvels of engineering, and their minds were sharp, curious, ever-learning, and methodical. Yet, despite their progress, something about them felt distant, almost sterile. The Votari were brilliant, but there was an underlying coldness to their interactions, an absence of the raw emotional connection that seemed to define human nature. Drake spent much of his time thinking about this difference. As he walked the gleaming streets of the Votari cities, filled with towering spires and precise lines, he couldn't help but compare it to the chaotic, yet vibrant, streets of Earth. Humanity, for all its flaws, thrived on its emotions, on connections forged not just through intellect, but through shared experiences. He missed the warmth of a simple handshake, the clasp of a hand on a shoulder, the unspoken bonds of trust that were built through these small physical gestures. One evening, as he and Lyra sat beneath the pale light of a distant star, the conversation shifted in a direction that made Drake's heart race. Why is it so important for you to touch and connect physically? Lyra asked, her voice filled with a mixture of curiosity and uncertainty. I understand that humans value intellectual connection, but your physical bonds, they seem so primal. Drake paused, feeling the weight of her words. Lyra had spent months observing humans and their interactions, learning about the way they communicated not just through words, but through actions, gestures, and touch. She had witnessed how even the smallest act of contact could hold so much meaning, from the firm handshake that sealed a deal to the comforting embrace between friends or lovers. Yet she couldn't quite grasp why it seemed so essential to humans. He thought for a moment, searching for the words to explain something so deeply ingrained in him. Finally, he looked into her eyes, his voice steady but passionate. Touch, he began slowly, is how we communicate when words fall short. It's the bridge between hearts. It's a way to connect with someone beyond what they say, beyond what they think. It's physical, yes, but also emotional. When we touch, we're sharing something. Trust, care, affection, understanding. That words can't always convey. It's through touch that we build relationships, from friendship to love, and it's through those relationships that we build our societies. He let out a breath, his voice softening as he continued. When I was a kid, my parents would hug me after a tough day, or a friend would slap me on the back to congratulate me. In that moment, I felt seen, understood. It made me feel like I belonged, like I wasn't alone. and that more than anything else creates bonds that last. Those bonds are what make us stronger, not just as individuals, but as a civilization. Lyra was silent, her violet eyes reflecting the starlight as she pondered his words. She had learned much about humanity during her time with Drake, but this concept, this deep-seated need for physical connection, was something she had yet to fully understand. In her world, the Votari communicated with precision, with language and thought, but there was little place for the messy, unpredictable nature of physical touch. Her people didn't embrace each other in the way humans did. Their emotions, while strong, were expressed through intellect, not through skin-to-skin connection. "I see," Lyra said after a long pause, her voice thoughtful. "But does it not weaken you to rely on such impermanent bonds?" Drake smiled, his eyes filled with a warmth she had not yet seen in her own people. "No," he said firmly, "it doesn't weaken us. It makes us stronger. Because when we reach out, when we trust each other enough to make those connections, we build something that's much greater than any one person. We create a foundation that supports not just individuals, but entire communities. And that's what drives us. That's what makes humanity unique. Our ability to form bonds that are both intellectual and emotional, to combine thought and feeling in ways no other species can." Lyra's brow furrowed, and for the first time, there was a flicker of doubt in her expression. She had always prided herself on the Votari's ability to distance themselves from emotions, to focus purely on the intellectual and the logical. But now, as she looked at Drake, at the conviction in his eyes, the passion in his words, she wondered if there might be something to what he said, something that her people, for all their intelligence, had overlooked. "You make it sound beautiful," Lyra said quietly, almost to herself. "It is," Drake replied with a gentle nod. "It's messy, it's imperfect, but it's real. And that's what makes us human." For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of their conversation hanging between them like a delicate thread. Lyra, the calm and collected observer, was no longer certain in her beliefs. The idea of physical bonds, of touch and emotion, playing such a crucial role in building connections, was something that intrigued her. It challenged everything she had known about her own people. "I think I understand," she said finally, her voice soft. "It's not about weakness, it's about strength. But do you think your people could ever learn to live without it? To live without that need for physical connection?" Drake shook his head. "I don't think so. It's too ingrained in who we are. We need it. Just as you need your intellect, your peace, your precision, we need each other in every way possible." Lyra's eyes searched his, a new understanding beginning to form between them. She was still uncertain, still grappling with the idea that something so simple, so physical, could hold such power. But now, she saw the potential for connection in ways she hadn't before. There was strength in these bonds, something she hadn't fully appreciated. And for the first time, she began to wonder, maybe humanity's way of connecting was not just a quirk, but a gift. The alarm blared through the corridors of the command center, a shrill sound that pierced through the chaos. On the massive holographic screen, the blinking red dots indicated a growing threat near Earth's orbit. The Votari fleet, stationed to defend the planet, had detected an unknown alien ship entering the atmosphere. It was large, menacing, and unidentifiable. An immediate and terrifying presence. The Earth's defenses, still recovering from previous skirmishes, were not enough to handle this new challenge. "Captain Drake." Lyra's voice cut through the din. Her eyes locked on the screen as she quickly assessed the situation. "The enemy is too powerful for us to engage alone." Drake, standing beside her, clenched his jaw in frustration. He wasn't used to waiting, especially when human lives were on the line. "Then we fight together, Votari," he growled, his hands gripping the edge of the console. "No more hesitations. If we don't stop them now, Earth won't stand a chance." Lyra nodded, her heart racing. "We need to combine our strengths, human ingenuity and our tactical precision. I'll coordinate with my fleet, but we'll need your human soldiers to defend Earth's surface." The two of them, a human and a Votari, had come a long way. At first, they had been divided by their species' history of distrust, but now they had no choice but to work as one. The Votari fleet took formation in space, while Captain Drake organized the human defense forces. Lyra, her mind sharp as ever, worked with Drake to form a strategy that would force the enemy back, no matter the cost. "You're going to have to stay in the air support," Drake told Lyra as they moved to the communication bay, his tone serious. "Our soldiers on the ground can't take on the full assault." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "You underestimate us, Captain. My people are more than capable of holding their ground." Drake paused, looking at her. "We'll see," he muttered. "But stay close, and don't try to be the hero. We're in this together." Lyra caught the concern in his eyes. There was something new in his gaze, something that hadn't been there before. Trust. She felt it, too, the growing bond between them, stronger than any simple alliance. As the battle began, the sky above Earth erupted into chaos. The alien ship, which appeared to be made of an unknown material, launched waves of energy blasts. Votari ships engaged the alien vessel, but their weapons were ineffective against its shields. Drake's human forces on the ground scrambled to defend strategic locations, fighting to keep civilians safe. Lyra led her fleet in a tactical strike, her mind calculating the enemy's every move. She moved like lightning, weaving between the attacks with precision and speed, issuing commands with unwavering authority. But amid the chaos, something unexpected happened. One of the enemy's blasts hit her ship directly, and the force sent it spiraling out of control. She lost contact with the command center as alarms blared in her cockpit. The ship crashed into the surface, sending shockwaves through the area. Drake, already on the ground, was coordinating his troops when he saw the explosion. His heart stopped. Without thinking, he bolted toward the crash site. He had no idea what had just happened, but there was one thing he knew for certain. Lyra was in trouble. His boots pounded against the cracked pavement, each step filled with purpose and adrenaline. As he reached the wreckage, smoke billowed from the twisted metal, and flames flickered in the darkened sky. He barely hesitated. Without a second thought, he dove into the wreckage, ignoring the pain as he crawled through the debris to find Lyra. When he found her, she was unconscious but alive, her breathing shallow. Blood stained her uniform, and she had clearly been injured during the crash. "Lyra," Drake shouted, shaking her gently. His heart pounded in his chest, a strange feeling flooding his veins, an overwhelming need to protect her. He had fought side by side with her, seen her strength, her wisdom, her resilience. And now, with the battle still raging around them, all he could think about was getting her to safety. His human instincts kicked in. He couldn't leave her behind. Not now. Not after everything they had been through. Lyra stirred as he gently lifted her, her voice weak but clear. "Drake, what are you doing?" "I'm not leaving you," he replied, his voice unwavering. "Not now. Not ever." Her breath hitched and she looked up at him, her eyes filled with surprise. She had never seen a human act like this, not in her years of battle. In her world, emotion often took a backseat to strategy and survival. But Drake's words and actions hit her hard. There was something deep, something pure in his need to protect her. As he carried her away from the wreckage, Lyra's mind raced. She had always seen humans as unpredictable, driven by emotion rather than logic. But this was something different. She realized, for the first time, that there was a depth to human spirit she had not fully understood. The bravery and kindness Drake showed weren't just reactions to a battle. They were reflections of the strength that lay within all humans. The need to protect, to fight for others, to build connections even when the world seemed to crumble around them. Drake didn't let go of her, didn't falter, even as the battle continued in the distance. She saw in him the same strength she had witnessed in their collaboration during the operation. It wasn't just strategy or tactics. It was the bond between them. the shared purpose that transcended their differences. As he lowered her to safety, Lyra finally allowed herself to relax. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the moment. She had learned something invaluable today, not just about humans, but about herself as well. There was no room for division when survival depended on unity. They were no longer strangers, no longer enemies. They were allies. And in that moment, they were friends. The sun set over Earth's horizon, casting a soft golden glow over the planet's surface. The once chaotic skies, now clear and peaceful, were a reminder of the hard-fought battle they had won. The enemy threat had been neutralized, and the Votari fleet, alongside the human defense forces, stood victorious. Cities once on the brink of destruction were now safe, their people beginning to rebuild and heal. Earth had been spared, thanks to the cooperation between two species that had once been on the brink of war. Lyra stood on the observation deck of the Votari ship, her gaze fixed on the Earth below. The battle had left its marks on her, both physically and emotionally, but it had also given her something invaluable, a new understanding of the humans she had come to respect, and especially of Captain Drake, the human who had risked everything to protect her. She thought back to the moments they had shared during the battle. The way he had rushed to her side when she had been injured, without hesitation or thought for his own safety. The way his unwavering determination to protect and care for others had stood in stark contrast to the cold, calculated logic of her own people. It was something Lyra had struggled to comprehend at first, but now she saw it for what it truly was, a strength unlike any she had known. For the Votari, emotional connections had always been seen as unnecessary. Their bonds were formed through shared purpose and intellectual cooperation, but there had never been the need for the deep emotional ties that humans relied on. They viewed relationships as practical, functional, nothing more. Yet in her time with the humans, Lyra had come to realize that it wasn't the absence of these emotional connections that made her people strong, but rather the presence of them that made humans so resilient. She recalled Drake's words as they had fought side by side, the way he had spoken of trust, of loyalty, and of the unspoken bond between them. It was a connection that had nothing to do with logic or strategy. It was something deeper, something that transcended the physical and intellectual. And now, she understood why humanity thrived on these bonds, why they held so much meaning for them. With a deep breath, Lyra turned to find Drake standing behind her, his expression somber but thoughtful. He, too, had been changed by the events of the past few days. The walls between them had fallen, and though they came from two vastly different worlds, there was no denying the connection they had forged. It wasn't just about survival or alliance. It was about something more, something that neither species could ignore. "I've been thinking," Lyra said softly, turning to face him, "about the way humans form connections. It's not something we understand in the same way, but I think I've come to see its value. Your kind don't just survive on strength or intellect, but on these bonds that tie you together." Drake nodded, his gaze never leaving her. "It's not just about the mind, Lyra. It's about the heart. Without it, we're lost." Lyra paused, her eyes narrowing in thought. "I've spent my life surrounded by logic, by calculation. But now, I see that there's more to you than just what can be measured. You fight not only for victory, but for each other. You fight because you care." That is something I never fully understood, until now. A silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft hum of the ship. Then, with a small but meaningful gesture, Lyra reached into a compartment at her side and produced a small, delicate crystal. It was smooth and translucent, pulsing faintly with a light of its own. "This is a Votari communication crystal," she said, holding it out to him. "It allows for deep emotional connection. It's not like what you humans have. Your bonds are physical, tangible. But this is a way for us to communicate not just with our minds, but with our hearts." Drake took the crystal, his fingers brushing over the smooth surface. The gesture moved him more than he expected. It wasn't just a gift, it was a symbol of everything they had shared, everything they had learned from each other. The bond that had formed between them wasn't just the result of necessity or alliance. It was real, and it meant more to him than he could put into words. Without thinking, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his wedding band, the ring that had once symbolized his union with his wife, now a symbol of his understanding of what it meant to form bonds. He extended it to Lyra, his eyes meeting hers. Lyra's eyes widened as she took the ring, the weight of its meaning settling in her chest. She looked at him, her heart beating a little faster. This was more than just a token. It was a symbol of the friendship they had built, of the connection they had formed despite their differences. She had never expected this kind of gesture from a human. And yet here it was, a simple, powerful act of trust. As they stood there, the world around them seemed to pause for a moment. There were no more battles to fight, no more enemies to face, only the understanding between them, forged in the heat of conflict and the quiet moments of reflection that followed. They had both learned something about each other, something about the world beyond their own species, and about themselves. When the time came for Lyra to leave Earth, to return to her people, she found herself standing beside Drake once more, looking out at the vast expanse of space. "You will always be inside me," she said softly, her words not just a farewell, but an acknowledgement of the bond they had shared. Drake smiled, though there was sadness in his eyes. "Same here, Lyra. Same here." As the ship prepared to depart, Lyra looked back at the human she had come to respect, and with a final glance, she stepped into the unknown. But she no longer felt alone, for the bond they had formed would remain, transcending species, distance, and time. And as for Drake, he knew that despite the vastness of the universe, there was one thing that would always connect them, the understanding that they were, in a way, forever intertwined. The universe was vast, but now it seemed a little smaller, a little more connected.